a little scamp.
There are moments in life when we feel we've been wronged and think of settling the score. Some women take retribution to a lethal level. A twisted therapist can't handle being dumped.
Die, slag.
She set out that night to cause pain and suffering, and that's exactly what happened.
A scorned mistress makes her lover pay.
She's a scarlet woman. She'd lived all this time, this secret life and this immoral life.
And a petty theft ends in brutal murder.
I think she was tortured. This was not a quick death.
When these deadly women can't get their own way, they will make others suffer. They commit ruthless revenge. A woman's heart is a delicate thing.
She couldn't stand the fact that he left her.
An unstable mind, even more fragile.
She had lost all grip of reality.
And when one cracks, lives will shatter.
Heather was the last trick-or-treater anyone would want knocking on their door.
England, 2002. The ancient city of York is home to 44-year-old Heather Stevenson Snell, a respected psychotherapist running a private practice in her home.
She was a very clever woman. She had a degree in psychology. She graduated from York University.
By day, she is a typical professional. By night, another Heather emerges, one that her clients would barely recognize.
Heather was the leader of a female biker group named Stuff the Ironing. And they used to meet regularly in this converted garage that she called her Orange Pit.
She seemed to be someone who was able to live almost two separate lives.
To impress her gang, biker Heather creates a fantasy world.
She would invent stories about her past, about her father, that he was a famous writer or that he was a spy. It seemed anything really that would gather her some attention.
She brags of underworld connections and has an impressive collection of weapons.
Heather had this fascination with weapons. She collected knives. She had a pistol from the Second World War.
Do you think I could kill someone? Go on.
I think she'd had lessons over a 4-month period to learn how to shoot a shotgun.
It's a rather unusual hobby for a woman to collect weapons and display them in their home, but Heather did.
Heather doesn't have a family, but she has 2 dogs. When she hires a dog trainer, her life takes a turn for the better. 42-year-old Adrian Sinclair answers her ad.
In many ways, Adrian seemed to be quite a vulnerable young man. He admitted that he had a lot of issues that he wanted to address himself. Initially, Heather was there to help him.
It's a live-in job that soon comes with extra perks.
Adrian began to work for Heather, and fairly soon afterwards, they also began a sexual relationship.
When Heather met Adrian, it was instant attraction for both of them. But Adrian saw quicker than most did how controlling and difficult Heather could be.
Oh, that's bloody strong.
And her world is turning out to be a dangerous place.
She had an obsession with weapons.
Is that bloody loaded?
Maybe. Maybe not.
could blow your guts out with this.
This isn't the job Adrian expected.
He became increasingly uncomfortable in the relationship.
Just 3 weeks after moving in, he wants out. But Heather responds with a threat.
If he ever left her, if he ever went off and met anybody else, she would cause damage to that person. She would cause injury to that person and hurt them. So he was always a bit afraid of leaving her.
Ready to go?
In the summer of 2002, there's an opportunity for Adrian to escape.
No problem.
Heather is going to the US to take a course.
We're okay, aren't we?
Yeah. We're fine.
Heather went on a screenwriting course to New York, and she was gone for 4 months. He then took the opportunity and thought, right, this is my time to go, and he moved out.
With Heather 3,000 miles away, Adrian is free to find new love. And he does. 35-year-old Diane Lomax, a caring mother of 2 young children. The relationship is kept secret from Heather, but Adrian's sister knows all about it.
Heather was a master manipulator, and she could get people to give her information they shouldn't.
Hi.
She used that side of her personality and those skills to get Adrian's sister to give her all kinds of private information.
I gave him money.
Adrian's sister let slip that he had a new girlfriend.
Diane Lomax. Why, the little scamp.
Heather is furious and soon returns home.
So nice of you to come to the end.
Adrian doesn't want her as an enemy, so he offers to pick her up from the airport.
Unfortunately, his attempts to make the situation better took a turn for the worse as they ended up in bed together. For her, this meant that the relationship was back on.
For Adrian, it's a one-night stand, but for Heather, it's just the beginning. In York, England, in 2002, psychotherapist Heather Stevenson Snell has her own issues.
How dare she?
Being dumped by her boyfriend, Adrian Sinclair, sends her off the deep end. Adrian and his new girlfriend, Diane Lomax, are about to feel the full extent of Heather's rage.
When Heather returned back from New York, she began this pattern of harassment.
She began calling Adrian obsessively, and then when she managed to get hold of his girlfriend's details, began a hate campaign against her as well.
Adrian and Diane are the primary targets, but Diane's young children are fair game too.
Heather was taking to following Diane on her way to school with her children. She would pass on letters, leave threatening phone calls.
Better be careful next time you take your kids to school. Never know who's watching.
The harassment goes on for over a year.
I can't take it anymore. She follows me wherever I go.
In desperation, Adrian moves his new family an hour away. Heather is one step ahead.
Hello?
What's the weather like in Huddersfield?
Leave also now!
Heather found out and called them up in advance of the move to tell them that she already knew and that really it was pointless. There would be no escape.
I saw you today, Diane.
This was classic stalking behavior. Even as it became more and more extreme, she seemed unable to stop herself, apply the brakes, examine why she was behaving in such a bizarre and violent fashion.
But in Heather's mind, intimidation is no longer enough. Now, only real revenge can satisfy.
Heather put a lot of planning into this and compulsively wrote down things to remember.
Okay, we can do this.
She had index cards showing her route down to the scene, her escape route back to her home address.
Everything had been planned meticulously, from the getaway vehicle to a bike that had been placed in a hidden location, through to all the outfits that she planned to wear. Everything was detailed on those cards.
Even down to the date, October the 31st, Halloween.
It wasn't an accident that Heather chose Halloween night to commit the murder and to dress as one of the scariest characters ever known to Halloween, the Fright Mask.
Die, slag, die!
What should be a night of harmless pranks is about to become a real-life horror show.
Heather saw Diane as the biggest obstacle to Heather's own happiness, and she wanted to destroy her. She had an hour to drive to the murder scene. She had an hour to change her mind, but that was never going to happen. She was a woman on a mission.
Her objective is simple: destroy her rival and kill Adrian's hopes for happiness.
Come out here, slag! Come out, slag!
But Adrian isn't home that night. Diane is alone with her children.
She could see this image there of somebody in a screen mask and thought, I'm not opening the door.
But the racket draws out a concerned neighbor, Bob Wilkie.
It's too late for trick-or-treating.
He heard the knocking and thought, I've got children in bed. I'm going to go out and tell them to be quiet.
You're waking my children. Go away. Get out of here, you stupid woman.
He thinks Heather is just a noisy trick-or-treater. He has no idea she is armed with a sawed-off shotgun. The moment Bob pulls off Heather's mask,
I said get out of here!
his fate is sealed.
I told you to go away! Why don't you listen to me? You horrible silly
Bob was shot at point-blank range. He had almost no chance of survival and suffered massive internal injuries. At that point, Diane had opened her door. She saw the scene in front of her and began screaming. It was a horrific scene.
Heather planned this crime down to the last detail. But in the end, she still killed the wrong person.
Heather flees, but not fast enough. She drives down the freeway so slowly, police pull her over. They find blood in her car and the shotgun. The deranged therapist is arrested for possessing a firearm. She admits to nothing, but a police search of her home reveals her thinking right down to the address of the murder scene.
From arriving at the police station, she wanted to be in charge. She wanted to lay down the ground rules, which cell that she wanted to go into, what time she wanted a lunch, how long the interview would last for. Yes, she's definitely used to being the one who runs things. Very, very controlling.
Heather felt no guilt for what she did. She wasn't even contrite with the police when they were questioning her. She lacked insight into her plight, or she didn't care.
The twisted shrink is now herself the subject of a psychological evaluation. The results are textbook. Heather has histrionic personality disorder.
People that have this affliction are very difficult to live with. They have to be the center of attention. Everything they do is exaggerated. They cannot tolerate rejection. And most importantly, they do not learn from their mistakes.
On September 21st, 2004, Heather is sentenced to life with a minimum of 22 years for murdering Bob Wilkie and the attempted murder of Diane Lomax. The practitioner turned prisoner is eligible for parole in 2026.
She set out that night to cause pain and suffering, and that's exactly what happened.
Some people absolutely cannot tolerate being rejected. And when it happens, they want revenge.
Love is a powerful emotion.
She was going to make him pay.
But when a lover is scorned,
I suspect that she felt even more betrayed than she ever had in the past.
revenge can be sweet.
Murderous revenge can never be justified, but it's a story as old as time.
In Salt Lake City in 1896.
As your senator of these great and mighty United States of America,
Arthur Brown is a hero of the Republican Party. His keen intellect propels the 53-year-old attorney into high office and a place in history.
He was very prominent in Utah. He was one of the first two senators from Utah to serve in Washington, D.C.
and the rights of you fine ladies here present.
He has enlightened views for his time, including pushing for women's rights. It wins him a legion of female admirers, including 23-year-old Anne Bradley.
She was prominent in several organizations here in Utah. She, including the Republican Party, the Utah Women's Press Club.
Married with 2 children, Anne is no ordinary housewife. She's a spirited, free thinker, a woman with ambitions of her own.
Anne Bradley was not a shrinking wallflower. She was involved in a lot of different community activities with other bright women. Anne was even a bit of a feminist.
Anne's political work throws her into Arthur's orbit. He may be 30 years her senior and married, but Arthur's charisma proves irresistible.
Arthur Brown was a wealthy and successful man, but when it came to the opposite sex, he was a hopeless womanizer. When he met Anne Bradley, he met his match.
Oh, dear.
That's like Christmas. Yeah, it's very precious. Just like
The couple is soon having an affair. It costs Anne her marriage, but she is too smitten to care.
It wasn't that unusual for wealthy men at that time, certainly, to have mistresses, sometimes for long periods of time.
Their love affair becomes hot gossip and soon reaches the ears of Arthur's wife, Isabel. Arthur's infidelity shouldn't surprise Isabel. Before becoming his wife, she too was his mistress.
Where have you been?
oh, it's just a bit of fun.
Isabel and Arthur have a son. Separation is not an option.
Half the city knows about you and that woman.
Oh, that.
I will never give you a divorce.
But the affair does continue for years and produces 2 illegitimate sons.
Anne Bradley's and Arthur Brown's sons were bastards, and that was a very serious thing, a very serious social stigma.
The new mom wants to become the wife. Isabel has no intention of becoming the ex, Mrs. Brown.
I need time, places. Where's Bean?
She meets with a private investigator to hatch a plan.
I need it fixed today.
She had Brown and Bradley followed, and they were seen entering a hotel room together.
In Utah, in 1903, adultery isn't just a sin. It will get you arrested.
Robberies, burglaries, hold-ups every night, but nothing done.
Anne and Arthur are hauled before the courts. Not once, but twice. Arthur is indignant at the intrusion, but the saucy affair is a reporter's dream come true.
The affair was an ongoing event here in Salt Lake. It was written up in the newspapers many times.
Anne was so in love with Arthur that not even the public humiliation of being caught together, charged with adultery twice, not even that was enough to cloud her judgment.
Adultery charges don't stick to a clever attorney like Arthur. He is soon off the hook, but not his mistress.
Brown was acquitted, and Bradley was convicted of adultery. But she never served any sentence for it.
Some people certainly thinking that she's a scarlet woman, you know, she lived all this time, this secret life and this immoral life. On the other hand, I think a number of people would put the bulk of the blame on Brown.
The public humiliation doesn't end their affair. It strengthens it. Arthur turns on his wife for betraying him and demands a divorce.
And I suppose this is important, Isabel?
But Isabel has an ace up her sleeve. Some 300 raunchy, tell-all love letters from Anne.
It stops now.
Isabel threatens to pursue fresh adultery charges to destroy Arthur's reputation and career forever.
Mrs. Brown said that she would drop the charges against them if he would drop the divorce case against her.
Arthur pledges to end the affair.
Never see her again. I hope so. We can go back to exactly the way it was.
But he didn't achieve high office by keeping promises. In Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1903, two women are fighting over their man, respected Senator Arthur Brown. He promises his wife, Isabel, he will dump his longtime lover, Anne Bradley. But he hasn't, and now Isabel is on the warpath.
Anne gave up a lot for Arthur. He promised to marry her and take care of their children with her, and then he didn't.
Arthur is a veteran of tough negotiations, but he can't control two women's fury. Isabel and Anne demand he choose between them. But nature decides for him. Isabel dies of cancer.
Anne assumed that this meant that they could finally be together. He wouldn't have to go through the process of a divorce, certainly. And so she expected that they would get married.
Okay, now you're on the street.
What's the matter?
I have a reputation, which has been damaged. So this
But instead of a proposal of marriage, Arthur gives Anne a one-way ticket out of town and cuts her off financially.
that you can start a new life.
So finally realizing that he probably was not going to marry her, she asked him for a loan of $2,000 to help.
$2,000?
She lost a lot. She was scorned and humiliated. It pushed her over the edge.
December 13th, 1906. Arthur travels to Washington, D.C. on business, a long way from his troubled love life in Utah, or so he thinks. Anne has followed him there. She gets into his hotel room by pretending to be his wife.
I believe it was in Anne's mind that she was going to be doing more than simply talking to Arthur.
She discovers love letters on Arthur's desk, but they are not from her.
He had been carrying on a love affair by letter with another woman.
From the letters, she discerned that they were engaged and were going to be married.
Anne has been double-crossed again.
In those days, a woman's virtue was everything. And from Anne's point of view, Arthur stole hers, and she was going to make him pay.
After 8 years of playing second fiddle, Anne is through with sacrifices.
For some people, rejection causes intense pain. They cannot bear it. The only thing they believe will end their pain is to destroy the source of the pain. For Anne, that meant killing Arthur.
You lied to me. Anne, put the gun down. Put the gun down.
Is this a crime of love or is this a crime of hate? Does Anne kill him because she loves him so much and she can't stand to see him with somebody else? Or is it hatred? You betrayed me too many times. My suspicion would be that it seems to be hate by this point.
Anne's relationship with Arthur destroyed his life in many ways, but he brought it all on himself.
Anne is charged with murder, but pleads madness.
Her attorneys argued kind of temporary insanity.
I think a better description of temporary insanity is that it was a crime of passion. Her emotions were out of control. And she shot him because she loved him so much.
The all-male jury is sympathetic to Anne's story of betrayal. She is acquitted.
Anne lived at the right time. In those days, a woman's virtue was everything, and Arthur was a cad. Anne Bradley was a very bright woman. If she had put into her own development the energy she put into the affair with Arthur Brown, she would have been a U.S. Senator.
Sometimes revenge is so brutal,
The scene just became more and more horrific.
so vicious.
That is one of the most brutal murders I've ever encountered.
It can sicken, harden cops,
I just was not prepared to see what I saw.
and leave an entire town quaking with fear.
And the place was in shock, and people were terrified. People were terrified.
19-year-old Brittany Norwood is a star soccer player who wins a scholarship to a New York college in 2003. But she is also a thief.
Brittany had a history of theft and stealing, taking advantage of people closest to her.
You got a problem? Huh? Huh?
When she gets caught, she loses her scholarship.
She had been discharged from her soccer scholarship at the college where she was attending because of stealing from her teammates. She had lost her scholarship.
It's not the first time Brittany is caught stealing.
While she was never convicted of a crime, ever, there was some foreshadowing. There were some things there that made you know not everything what might be as it appeared in the life of this young woman.
8 years later, in Bethesda, Maryland, Brittany's sporting interests are once again put to good use. As a sales assistant at a popular chain of athletic stores, Lululemon. And she has a good manager in sunny 30-year-old Jana Murray.
How's everything going? Good. Yeah, great. I was thinking, you know, when we photoed them.
Jana Murray walks into the room. Jana Murray is probably the smartest person in the room and maybe the most beautiful. She had finished her coursework on her second and third masters, which included an MBA from one of our more prestigious universities, Johns Hopkins.
Jana is an ambitious go-getter, and supervising the store is the first step in an ambitious career plan.
She was about to move out to the Seattle area where her longtime boyfriend lived. She liked working at the store so much she was possibly going to work at the corporate office out there.
Jana's career prospects are glittering. For Brittany, the store job is just a stepping stone.
What Brittany really wanted to do was become a personal trainer. She had interviewed at this high-end gym around the corner, and she was really about to get this job.
Both girls' futures are looking bright until it comes to a routine that they're required to do every evening when they close up shop. It's standard security for employees to check each other's bags for theft. It is usually uneventful, except on the night of March 11th, 2010. Brittany is caught stealing from the store.
When Jana checks Brittany's bag, she's got a pair of pants from the store.
Oh, do you have the receipt?
She asks for the receipt.
No, you know what? I must have tossed it.
She can't produce the receipt. They go back and they try to get onto the store computer. Store computer has been logged off. They can't get it to reboot. They can't check it.
We can check it.
They say, okay, fine, we'll deal with it tomorrow morning. They walk out. They go separate ways.
After Brittany and Gina left the store and went their separate ways, Brittany had some time to think about what she had done and that it was probably going to be a catastrophe for her.
Brittany tries to call Jana to beg forgiveness, but she's not quick enough.
As soon as Jana gets out, she makes 2 phone calls.
Did Brittany buy some pants today?
She calls the young lady who Brittany says she bought the pants from. Woman says, I didn't sell her anything.
No, I didn't think so. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Second phone call goes to the store manager.
Jana said, look, I found something. I think Brittany stole something.
Because they were in her bag and I didn't see a receipt.
The store manager says, fine, I'll deal with it in the morning. I'm gonna fire her.
Brittany needs to think fast. In the past, her stealing cost her a scholarship. Now she stands to lose her livelihood.
It was gonna cost her the job she'd been working towards as a personal trainer.
I think she realized afterwards that her life was about to change. She wasn't going to get that job. Everyone would find out, and she absolutely could not bear that.
Hey, Jana.
When Brittany finally gets through to her colleague, she claims she's left her wallet in the store.
Cool. Thanks.
We don't believe that she ever forgot anything. This was subterfuge to lure her back to the store.
The 2 girls meet alone at the store. By morning, it will be a shocking crime scene. March 11th, 2011, Bethesda, Maryland.
No, all good.
And yours?
In an upscale Lululemon store in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
What's this? Oh, you know what?
Brittany Norwood, 29, is caught stealing clothes by her colleague, 30-year-old Jana Murray. But fate seems to intervene to keep her secret. Employees arrive at work to a shocking sight. Supervisor Jana lies dead in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and apparently raped. In a bathroom, another terrified victim.
The initial story came from her that two masked men came into this store after they had closed it, attacked both of them, sexually assaulted both of them, killed Jana.
The claim seems to be confirmed when police find bloody footprints throughout the store, made by a man's size 14 shoe. A public appeal is made for help to solve this horrific crime.
You have a community who thinks that they're looking for two boogeymen. 300 leads were followed by this police department.
Brittany recovers in the hospital
How's my friend?
and learns her colleague hasn't survived. With a young woman murdered and Brittany assaulted, shoplifting is the last thing anyone is worrying about. Until police find an interesting clue in the store.
We find a man size 14 in the store that is hidden in a shelf that was washed off. You don't have to be an expert to see that this impression was made by this shoe.
But who do they belong to, and why were they left in the store? DNA tests reveal the answers.
Brittany's DNA was in shoes that had tracked through this blood. The leading theory is that Brittany started this by hitting Jane in the head with some heavy object.
This was not a quick death. Death was slow, it was torturous. There were 10 weapons used, at least. The metal bar, an iron bar, must weigh about 10 pounds, used to crush your skull. What you have is during the course of this attack, once it begins, Brittany stopping, going and get another weapon. Because whatever she had at the time wasn't doing the job. There are 102 defensive wounds on her hands, her inner arms, where she was trying to ward off the blows.
The reason Brittany was able to start and stop the assault so many times and use so many different weapons is because she was enjoying herself and she was experimenting. It wouldn't have been that difficult for Brittany to just finish her off, but she didn't. She played with her. She was enjoying, I think, Jana's suffering.
Jana survived every one of 332 blows. And it was the 332nd blow that killed her. The last blow was with a knife. That knife is on the opposite end of the store. She has to leave Jana's body. She has to get that knife, walk back across the store to the body of Jana, and stab her twice. One goes in one side of the neck, out the other goes into her brain, and that's the injury that kills her.
Brittany doesn't flee the scene. Instead, she makes it look like Jana is the victim of a robbery, one that ends in rape. She molests Jana's corpse in a degrading fashion.
After she killed her, she went back and she cut her pants, and she did some other things to make it appear that Jana had been sexually assaulted.
She wanted to create the idea that there were men in there, so she knew that the store had a pair of men's shoes.
She had taken off her own shoes, put on the men's shoes, walked in Jana's blood, and walked all over the store in these size 14s to make it look like there had been a man in there.
There's no handbook for murder. And so Brittany had to figure this out as she was going along. So after the murder, she concocts this ridiculous plan to make it look like she was also the victim of an attack.
In order to play the victim, Brittany needs to look like one.
She cut her forehead, she took razor blades, cut her breasts, cut her stomach, cut her legs. She made herself look like she was the victim of a sexual attack.
A scalpel and zip ties complete her alibi.
The entire scene was a recreation, and she had from 10 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning to do it. She had hours to do it.
Brittany is charged with first-degree murder. She pleads guilty, but claims her sadistic acts were not premeditated. She simply lost it.
But the evidence worked against that. Each one of those wounds is a time that Brittany could have stopped. And not only is she not stopping, but she's doing more and more. And so it was just impossible for the jury to conclude anything else that other than this was premeditated.
The jury's decision is quick. A guilty verdict is handed down in less than an hour. On January 27th, 2012, Brittany Norwood is sentenced to life in jail with no chance of parole.
She got the highest possible sentence you can get here in Maryland for the crime she committed. I have prosecuted over 100 murderers, many women who were accused of murder. I've never seen anything of this level of violence involving a woman. Nothing that even approaches it.
It's possible for someone to be really messed up inside and not have others see it. Some people are very skilled at hiding a dark nature, and Brittany was one of those people.
These deadly women sought the ultimate retribution. Psychotherapist Heather Stevenson Snell couldn't handle being rejected. Anne Bradley snapped over her lover's deceit. And Brittany Norwood chose to kill rather than be branded a thief. When these three women took the law into their own hands, they showed no mercy. They were guilty of ruthless revenge.